The crises we face in our world today are nothing new. They're the result of sin's effect on God's very good creation. Our lesson today takes us back to the history of the Israelites as they were preparing to enter into the land of Canaan, which too would have been a time of uncertainty, fear, and trying to hear the voice of God in all the noise. We left the Israelites at the Acacia Grove with Moses still in charge. But while there, much happens. Besides falling for the plan of Balaam to entice the men into worshiping the Baal of Peor and the resulting plague that God sends as punishment, which we covered last week, the Israelites now have a new leader. Moses has died on the mountain, and Joshua has been named his successor. God himself has met with Joshua and promised to help him. He need only obey God completely, be strong and courageous, and God will do the rest. The time has come to begin moving into the land of Canaan, and like Moses before him, Joshua sends 2 spies to check out the land and inspect their first obstacle, Jericho. So today's lesson is from Joshua 2. Then Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Acacia Grove. He instructed them, scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River, especially around Jericho. So the 2 men set out and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night. But someone told the king of Jericho, "Some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, "Bring out the men who have come into your house, for they have come here to spy out the whole land." Rahab had hidden the 2 men, but she replied, "Yes, the men were here earlier, but I didn't know where they were from. They left the town at dusk as the gates were about to close. I don't know where they went, but if you hurry, you can probably catch up with them." Actually, she had taken them up to her roof and hidden them beneath bundles of flax that she had laid out. So the king's men went looking for the spies along the road leading to the shallow crossings of the Jordan River. And as soon as the king's men had left, the gate of Jericho was shut. Before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went up to the roof to talk with them. "I know the Lord has given you this land," she told them. "We're all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror. For we've heard how the Lord made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. And we know what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, whose people you completely destroyed. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will be kind to me and my family since I've helped you. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live, along with my father and my mother, my brothers and sisters, and all their families." The men agreed. "We offer our own lives as a guarantee for your safety. If you don't betray us, we'll keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us the land." Then, since Rahab's house was built into the town wall, she let them down by a rope through the window. "Escape to the hill country," she told them. "Hide there for 3 days from the men searching for you. Then, when they've returned, you can go on your way." Before they left, the men told her, "We will be bound by the oath we have taken only if you follow these instructions. When we come into the land, you must leave the scarlet rope hanging from the window through which you let us down. And all your family members, your father, mother, brothers, and all your relatives must be here inside the house. If they go out into the street and are killed, it won't be our fault. But if anyone lays a hand on people inside this house, we will accept the responsibility for their death. If you betray us, however, we're not bound by this oath in any way." Rahab replied, "I accept your terms." And she sent them on their way, leaving the scarlet rope hanging from the window. The spies went up into the hill country and stayed there for 3 days. The men who were chasing them searched everywhere along the road, but they finally returned without success. Then the 2 spies came down from the hill country, crossed the Jordan River, and reported to Joshua all that had happened to them. "The Lord has given us the whole land," they said, "for all the people in the land are terrified of us." So Joshua sends covertly 2 spies to check out the first stop for acquiring the land, the city of Jericho. It's a dangerous mission, And upon choosing to enter the city, they find themselves in immediate danger. Whether it's their clothes, their speech, their mannerisms, they stand out. It's probable that the king of Jericho had spies of his own keeping an eye on the Israelites, because no sooner do they enter Rahab's house than the king sends word to her, "Bring out the men who are with you, for they are Israelite spies." Anyone who's familiar with this story knows one thing about Rahab, who she was: a prostitute. Today, I'd like to expand our thinking about Rahab. This was not just some loose woman plying her trade, whose place of business these men presumed would provide a believable cover. What was it that brought them to her house? Could it be that she too recognized these men as from the camp of Israel and the imminent danger of discovery they were in? From their conversation, it appears that she may have been more involved in their finding refuge in her home than just their seeking out a place that regularly welcomed male customers. It's obvious that Rahab saw an opportunity to align herself on the winning side, God's side, whom she acknowledges as the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. Now, many people could be tempted to downplay her role in the story. She's a prostitute, after all. A holy God wouldn't choose to have her play a significant role in the story of his chosen people, but that's where we would be wrong. The fact that Rahab is a prostitute is telling. She's got a painful history. No little girl grows up dreaming of becoming a sex worker. She may have been sold by her parents to a pagan shrine to earn favor with their gods, or maybe to settle a debt. She may have found herself widowed or abandoned by her husband with little to no options. We don't know her story before the Israelites end up in her home, except that she has very little faith in her own gods or her people and is looking for a way to gain favor with the God of the Israelites, whom she has heard such incredible stories about. The stories may be unbelievable, but it's obvious that Rahab has become convinced and she wants in. Her people have heard the same stories, and they're freaking out about the news that the Israelites have camped themselves on the other side of the Jordan River, just opposite the city. Unlike Rahab, they remain determined to oppose God to the bitter end. She shared their fear of the God of the Israelites, but rather than opposing God, she sought to align herself with him, and God blessed her. As we read along in Joshua, we will learn that the spies were true to the promise and rescued Rahab and all her family who had gathered in her house with her. Rahab becomes a member of the Israelite community when she marries a man named Solomon, whom some biblical scholars suggest had been one of the two spies. They had a son named Boaz, which we read about in the book of Ruth, who becomes the great-grandfather of King David, from whose line we all know the Messiah was born. Rahab is one of the Messiah's great-greats. So from her story, though, we see her choice of what she did in the midst of crisis. But how do we respond to God in the midst of crisis, uncertainty, and when we hear of wars and rumors of wars? Well, oftentimes, one of two ways. We can be confident, like the Israelites, knowing that God is going to lead us through whatever difficulties we might face as long as we remain obedient, or sometimes, even within the church, we stand in opposition to God, demanding that he, as good and loving, must take away the pain, the problems, the crisis, rather than trusting him to lead us through them. The Bible tells us that God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble, from Psalm 46, verse 1. Notice that the promise is for God's help in times of trouble, not his preventing any trouble from happening. Too often, we want God to sweep in and save the day, to do a miracle, to prove that he is indeed on our side. But when we face problems and opposition, the question should never be whose side is God on, but rather who is on God's side. God can absolutely work miracles, and he does. But it's also equally true that Jesus warned his followers that they would face persecution, just as he did. You see, God loves humanity equally, the good and the bad, the obedient and the disobedient, the submissive and the openly defiant. He plays no favorites. On the question of sides, what is important is whose side we're on. Do we reject God as the majority of the citizens of Jericho did? Or do we seek to align our beliefs and values to his, as Rahab did? Long before the Israelites made it across the Jordan River, God had been preparing the heart of one young woman, Rahab, rejected and abused by her own people, unheard by the God she had grown up with. She was ready to choose life with Israel's God, and he accepted her with open arms. God used her determination and her courage to help his chosen people and honored her as one of the individuals who would be included in the genealogy of his son. No matter what we experience as a part of life on this sin-infected planet, there are truths that we can hold tightly to. God's incredible love for us is demonstrated through the sacrifice of Jesus and his willingness to include any who would choose to serve him. This world, we have to remember, is not our home. We're here to serve as ambassadors of a far greater kingdom, a perfect place which sin can never corrupt, where the justice, love, and peace of God reign. It's our eternal home, heaven. The Bible clearly warns us that we will experience hardships in this life for a short while, but we can take heart. God has won, and we are his loved children. As long as we choose God's side, we will always have hope.